Hi, I'm Niki Roach, host of the podcast formerly known as Let's Talk Bwlb, and now with a new name, Planet Possible. The pod will be back for Series 3 in a few weeks, and until then, we're making some short audio specials inspired by the new name, Planet Possible. Today, I want to talk about the magic wand. Regular listeners will have heard me mention it a lot, and I often ask people I interview what they'd do if they had one. So let's have a listen to some guests from the last two series talk about what they'd do if anything was possible. First up, here's Chris Stark talking just before COP26 about what he wished would happen at the conference.
I would love, with my magic wand in Glasgow, for it to feel like a real moment globally, for us to have properly turned our attention towards actually tackling climate change. I feel very much that the themes that the presidency has put in place already, the focus on 1.5 degrees, the need to make sure that the climate finance is in place, the need for proper resilience and adaptation, they're the right themes. But what I would love to see is some proper action against those themes. And I might add just a bit more than that. So yes, we need the sort of 2030 emissions targets. We need the willingness to put $100 billion of finance in place to support climate action in the developing world. We need all that stuff, all that technical stuff that I know we'll be talking about. But what I really want, I suppose, with my magic wand is for that to not feel like a miserable process of agreeing because someone else says it must be done, the science says it must be done. I would love to see our world leaders actually lean into this and embrace it, because the transition is so positive overall for the societies that those world leaders are responsible for. That flip in the mindset is the thing I would really like to see in COP26. It's the thing I'd like to see in the UK as well. Not that we're being led to this because we absolutely must do it, but that actually we want to do it. We're running towards these goals because actually it points the way to a more positive economy overall, for better societies around the world, better outcomes generally for people living in the world today. I would love that. So that kind of idea that the discourse itself becomes more positive around climate change and less miserable is the thing I'd really want to try and pull off with my magic wand.
Next up with the magic wand is Tripti Rai. Tripti talked to me about the Beacon Project in Nepal, a collaboration between WaterAid, Anglian Water and local organisations. And Tripti would love to be able to magically solve the basic water, sanitation and hygiene issues that still loom large for many people in the world.
So many people still don't have access to safe drinking water. So many people would still be struggling to make sure that, their toilets are functional, that there is access, again, to, these basic provisions like water and soap to make sure that you can wash your hands. We have to continue to raise our voice to make sure that water sanitation hygiene is prioritized, not just as water sanitation hygiene in the domestic use, but also look at healthcare facilities. There, the situation is again, quite challenging because not all healthcare facilities would have good wash facilities, for example. Also in education, you still see that young girls don't often go to school when they have their periods because the school may not have a proper toilet. There may be lack of water. And if you are an adolescent girl who has her periods, then it'll be quite difficult to stay in school the whole day. So I think these things are still things that matter. And we will continue to see how we can advocate for certain policy changes, also help build the capacity where it's needed of institutions. And at the same time, like with Beacon, demonstrate how we can do it in a sustainable way in collaboration with different partners so that there is long-term provision of water sanitation for communities.
Let's hear from Brendan and Jackie from Australia, who I talked to for our Pride episode back in season 1. They'd like the global water industry to be more courageous when it comes to embracing diversity.
I'd say be brave and understand that organisations need diversity. We can talk about inclusion, but it's actually the diversity and inclusion, that it's not about fitting in, it's about actually valuing diversity within our workplaces and the different ways that we approach work. That's what the future needs.
Once you have that courage and that bravery, be proud. I'm much more open now about being gay and being very proud of the fact that I'm part of a great community like the LGBTIQ plus community. You don't want that to define you. You don't want that to be the thing that people go, oh, he's the gay guy or the queer person or whatever. But that visibility is so important, and that visibility and that proudness evokes conversation, and that's how we make the change, and that's how we progress things forward. really breaking down that taboo that LGBTIQ+ is not a bad word. It's a hard acronym to say, but it's not a bad word.
Now it's time to listen to Craig Bennett. And with his magic wand, he just wants us to have a bit more self-belief and be a bit more ambitious.
We can, as humanity, do amazing things when we put our mind to it. We didn't think we could create vaccines in a period of months and roll them out rather than years or decades. We didn't think we could build hospitals in a period of weeks and months and roll them out. Everyone said, no, can't be done. We don't know what we're capable of until we really put our minds to it. And I think if we start treating the climate emergency and nature emergency as that's what they are, we will surprise ourselves with how quickly we can turn things around. We don't know how fast we can get to net zero yet. There's all these rubbish cost curves that try and tell us how slow we can get there. No, we don't know how fast we can get there until we really try, and then we innovate and find that there's ways we could never have really dreamt of. If we get serious about it, I am convinced that we will move faster on tackling the climate emergency and the nature emergency than we ever dreamt was possible. We've just got to get ourselves collectively as humanity into that mindset, get that determination there, get the grit between our teeth, make it happen. And guess what? When we do, it's a much better world as well.
Dusty Gedge talked with real passion on the pod. He's an advocate for green roofs, and if he had magic powers, he'd make a few changes to how urban developments get planned and approved.
It's policy for starters for all new developments. There should be an expectation. I don't like mandatory because, you can't stymie design, but it should be relatively an expectation that nearly 70%, 80% of a roof is greened. It should be an expectation, yeah. That really needs to come from the national planning framework. But my view, the success in federal governments is cities decide how they want to articulate federal policies. So it's really important that cities decide what they want, and that actually we start to see green roofs, parks and gardens at roof level for people to be able to have access to green space. I'm always amazed that even in the planning conditions in London, so like Westminster, it says, oh yeah, these biodiversity, nobody's allowed on these roofs because it's for nature, And it's a bunch of ecologists like me saying, oh no, nobody's allowed on it. I just think we could be designing wild space on roofs which people could sit beside. People could go and sit on a roof which is designed for biodiversity and sit on the paving beside it, have a barbecue and just sit there. The wildlife's going to be happy, but actually people could be in a wild space. Now, as soon as you say people have to have access to a green roof, everybody goes, oh, high-end landscape architecture. You go, no. So we have these challenges that the ecologists go, no, people. And then when we say people can go on it, we go like, oh, it's got to be privet hedges and lawns. And you kind of go, hang on, we need to start realising actually some people just like to go and sit in a meadow. What's the problem? Oh, it might scare the birds away. I'm sorry, ecologists. I'm one of them. I don't think it's going to matter. Yeah. So, we put a lot of barriers up. And I'm sorry if I'm getting churlish, but I can't help it.
When I talked to Emma Howard-Boyd, she spoke about her desire for people to turn good ideas and noble ambitions into real and solid action.
For me, it's in the delivery of real solutions. There is ever more attention being placed on both the climate and the nature emergency. But for me, it's that translating of all the good words, all the rhetoric into real action on the ground. And I think sometimes collectively we are waiting for the perfect solution before we get on and start acting. I think another area that concerns me is how much we collectively as a society in this country, in other countries around the world, are prepared to pay for the environment, the natural environment that we want and deserve. And I think that is a conversation that needs to be had across all groups, whether they are private, public, or indeed third sector organisations, to really understand how we properly value the natural environment.
Finally, at the end of season 1, I invited some water industry figures for a roundtable discussion, and naturally I ended with a magic wand question. Rob Lawson called for more creativity and leadership, while Niki Russell wanted water talked about in the places where decisions are made.
The water sector is quite a hard area to innovate in because at the end of the day, we're providing a public health service. You know, COVID's obviously shown that in terms of washing hands. But I think in terms of how we're regulated and how the water companies are able to look at different ways of delivering their services and engaging with customers, there's got to be more capacity for innovation and the ability to fail and say, OK, that didn't work, but we've got a better idea now. And the second one we've touched on a little bit would be leadership. It's a multi-stakeholder environment. There are diverse organisations and individuals involved, from householders to plumbers to builders to academics and government regulators. We really could do with someone at the helm of this and some really strong leadership from government, potentially, because as we've discussed, things like labelling and metering are government-led interventions, but also some really smart way of interacting with people about this and really taking on board the idea that water it's central to our lives because it affects all the things that we do around cleanliness and hygiene and feeling good, you know, the soaking the bath, having fun, playing water fights out in the garden. We want to kind of influence how people consider water and link what they do in the home back to the environment. So I think that leadership piece is really important too.
Let's just get water efficiency a seat at the table where the big decisions are made. And talking about government, but also the water sector, water efficiency needs a seat at the table where people are talking about economic growth, net zero, housing, inequality. Let's get water efficiency part of those conversations. At the moment, it really is a bit too niche. And we just need to stick it in the middle of the table where all of those other issues that I've mentioned are being discussed.
It's brilliant to look back and hear the passion, insight and clarity with which our podcast guests spoke when thinking about their ideal visions for the future. And that's what we want with this podcast, Planet Possible, to be all about. Passionate, positive and practical. Season 3 is on its way, but in the meantime, look out for our final audio special coming soon, which will feature a load of industry figures outlining what they think is possible in the next 10 years. I'm Niki Roach. That's it for now. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.
Planet Possible is produced by Bwlb. Bwlb Bwlb. The best ideas, the strongest content.